You got to know where you are today. Before you can plan where you're going, you've got to understand where you are, both from a mindset as well as from a financial perspective. Hi, I'm Annette Bau, host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast and founder of the Millionaire Insider. My mission is to help you simplify the money game so you can create a financially secure and fulfilled life without having to have a PhD or spend countless hours on your finances. You're going to learn how to think like a millionaire, stop worrying about money and wondering if your financial house is truly in order, and instead spend your time doing what you love. With over 3 decades advising 7, 8, and even 9-figure millionaires, and now joining that elite group, I'm in a unique position to help you make the best financial choices so you can create a secure financial future and retirement you love. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. Today's free resource is our Financial Freedom Guide. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/FFG. Our Financial Freedom Guide is really designed to help you create the formula you need to succeed financially. It has taken me years to really identify this formula, which includes your mindset, your inner game, your strategy, your game plan, and then your execution, your outer game. And if you can combine those 3 elements, you can create a winning formula. And then you can stop worrying, experiencing anxiety or stress, and instead know what you need to do and really take the steps to make it a reality. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/FFG. For today's show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/111. I can't believe we're there. So exciting. All materials, forms, and intellectual property in this course are copywritten by themillionaireseries.com. All rights and information are reserved. Before beginning any plan, you agree to consult with your own team of advisors and review your situation. All participants agree to hold millionaireseries.com and its affiliates harmless for results achieved or not achieved, and any reproduction of this material is allowed only with written authorization from themillionaireseries.com. All international copyrights are reserved. Let's dive in. What is a financial plan and why is it so important to secure your financial future? A financial plan is basically a roadmap, kind of like a GPS to guide your life, your money, and your retirement decisions. It's so critical. Without it, you may risk missing key milestones, sometimes getting lost or even delaying your retirement for a decade. Not a lot of good comes from missing key milestones. With it, you can stop worrying about money and start focusing on what matters most. As I have re-engaged as a financial advisor over the last year and am accepting new clients, I am dumbfounded by some of the things that I'm seeing, like literally dumbfounded. I am beyond shocked. And I want to give you a couple examples. So I have seen individuals who have stopped funding their retirement. And this includes retirement accounts that are matched funding by their employer. Now, some of them are 3%, some of them are 6%, some of them are even 10%. So significant amount. And in a couple of cases, they stopped funding them so they could instead fund insurance. Now, one of the specific cases with one of the people who are now my client, and I do have permission to share this, they didn't even need more insurance. They were already adequately covered. And so now they've lost out literally in a couple of cases, tens of thousands of dollars in what they could have had free money, meaning you give me $5, I give you 10. I mean, anyone that wouldn't do that is not thinking clearly. And what's so concerning about a lot of this is the fact that an advisor actually recommended it. Some of the other things that I have seen are a lack of insurance, from umbrella policies to inadequate homeowners or property and casualty coverage, disability, long-term care, and even life insurance. I've also seen cases where people have invested money in annuities. Now, you know I love annuities, but you've got to get the right annuity. And in this particular case, there's actually been a few of them. They have not invested in an annuity that met their primary goal or need. So an annuity could have been a great option. It was just the wrong one. Boy, it's just so interesting. And then at the core level of a lot of this is I see products that have been sold are the highest commission in the marketplace. Now, clearly, if you need the product that has the highest commission, then you should get it. But in the cases I've seen, I just don't feel that's the truth. And unfortunately, in every one of these cases, the person has not been using a fiduciary, meaning a fiduciary has to act in your best interest, not theirs. I've seen a lot of situations where people don't even have an estate plan. They've been sold a bunch of products, but they don't even have a fundamental estate plan dictating how they want their assets to transfer. And then the beneficiary designations are incorrect. I have seen situations where the designation of the beneficiary is actually going to double the tax. I mean, it's just crazy, some of the things I'm seeing. One of the biggest issues is being sold products that don't make sense based on the client's goals, meaning once I've completed a plan, we've identified what they want to achieve, where they're at, what they've been sold does not match that. And basically what it's matched is where the advisor has made the most money. And those things are cringeworthy. I have seen hodgepodge of products with no clear destination, plan, or action of what to do. And then I've seen estate plans that weren't funded, meaning they go to the work of getting their trust and or will completed. But then what ends up happening is the person that has completed the trust does not fund it. That's kind of like not having an estate plan. Granted, what's going to happen is you do, because ultimately it'll end up there. But what you're going to do is be forced through probate. And in some cases, because people have owned their residence in another state, it's a double probate. In one case, I saw one of the people actually using an attorney that was giving a discount. And unfortunately, the problem with the attorney doing the discount was it was kind of like he wasn't even a qualified estate planning / tax planning attorney. He was more of a general attorney. So he was like trying to get business. And I'm thinking that is terrifying. When I started looking at the document, he had not included a lot of key elements that you need in your trust, specifically a trust protector, or making sure that you have an adequate successor trustee plan. There was none. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing. And so I hope that as we go through this today, you can pick up on some of the key elements of what is a financial plan and, more importantly, why it is so important. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to know where you are today. Before you can plan where you're going, you've got to understand where you are, both from a mindset as well as from a financial perspective. You want to ask yourself, what type of money personality do I have? And does my partner have? Meaning, are you a saver? Are you a spender? Are you an avoider? And the reason that's important is because it gives a lot of insight as to what you need to do to make sure you're hitting those key milestones, knowing what your deficit is. Meaning, let's just say you're a saver. So you say, oh, that's really good. But if you're a saver, but you just freak out when you have any risk, all right, that may not be so good. So you've got to make sure you're incorporating that into your plan. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of times, one of the partners is a spender, the other one is a saver. So what ends up happening is a complete conflict. You've got to work through that. And that's where somebody that has some expertise on more financial coaching or therapy can be really beneficial. You want to know where you are as far as a net worth standpoint. And more importantly than just where you are, what is the gap? Sometimes people have debt that's acceptable, meaning like a mortgage. Others have high interest consumer rates, and that is not good. So we want to make sure that we're clear on what the debt is. And even if it is good debt, we want to have a plan to have that paid off before you retire. You know, you do not want to go into retirement with debt. I mean, it's just not ideal. Now, granted, I have had people who've had debt and they have had sources of revenue, meaning from a standpoint of pensions, Social Security, and even personal pensions that allowed them to more effectively manage the debt. But I just don't recommend that. It's just generally not ideal. You also want to make sure you have an emergency reserve that can cover 3 to 12 months expenses. Now, again, the amount depends on your situation, your cash flow, where you are in the stage of your life, all of those things. And a good advisor can help you really get clear on that. You want to look at how organized you are with your finances, your assets, your liabilities, even the documents that pertain to your financial plan. That can be your estate plan, it can be life insurance policies, really any insurance policies. your cash flow, your balance sheet, your retirement accounts, pensions, Social Security, investments, all those things. And then you want to look at your estate plan. Do you have an adequate estate plan? Are you sure? And more importantly, how long ago did you do it? Now, I had a client who didn't want to update her estate plan, and she finally agreed to 10 years later, and now she's got some health concerns. Unfortunate situation was the fact that there were issues in there that have changed, meaning tax laws have changed. And so it was really optimal that she did it. She probably should have done it sooner, but at least she got it done. Now, are you doing this alone or are you working with somebody who's qualified? Sometimes what I find is that people try to go it alone because they think they're saving money, when in reality, in the one situation where I saw where a person did not have their estate plan, their financial plan, their tax plan, their retirement plan coordinated, they were going to be paying double taxes over what they could pay. So instead of paying, say, 20 to 22%, they were going to be paying 37%. That, my friend, is not a good thing. And that is not a way to save money. So you got to assess that. But the first thing is you got to know where you are today. The second thing is you've got to know and identify your destination. Where do you want to go and when? Ideally, you want to define your short-term goals. So if you do have debt, you want to get that paid off, whether it is a mortgage or possibly even saving for a child or grandchild's college, paying off your mortgage so you don't have a mortgage during retirement, or maybe even buying a second home. But you've got to get clear on what you want to achieve. That also includes how much money you want. I encourage you to take time to identify what a secure, financially free life looks like. What are you doing? Who are you hanging out with? Where do you live? And more importantly, how do you feel? What emotion is present? Meaning, when you have enough money and you know what you need to do and you're doing it and you know where you're going, you're going to have a lot more peace of mind than if you don't. And unfortunately, what happens with a lot of people is they never get really clear on that emotion, and then they get to their destination and they still feel miserable. They feel overwhelmed. They feel fearful, anxious, all those things. And the problem with that is the fact that they've never taken the time to really get clear on what they want from a standpoint of that emotional state. Now they'll say, yeah, I want peace of mind. I don't want to worry. I want to have happiness. I want to have joy. I want to have love. I want to be with my family, all those things. But we've got to learn how to embody that emotion, ideally now, so that we can train our brain. And when we get there, really enjoy it. Now, this took me a long time. I mean, I get it conceptually and I've always gotten it, but it took me years to really get clear on that. Meaning, I want to feel calm. I want to feel peace of mind. I want to feel security. Now, a lot of that does dictate how you're thinking, but more importantly, it also dictates that you get used to feeling like that now. So many people are addicted to the emotions of their past. If you were raised in a fearful environment or with a lot of anxiety or worry, that is going to be your go-to state. And the problem is, if you don't start working on that now, what ends up happening is once you achieve your goal, nothing's going to change. And that's why you see people who have a lot of money who are so depressed. People who have a lot of money who overdrink, overspend, overindulge on everything. They're trying to fill that inner void and it just doesn't work. So I really encourage you to get clear on that. And then you want to make sure that you have a plan for the detours that are going to come up. What happens if one of your children loses their job, or maybe one of your grandchildren, or your parents run out of money, or you and or your partner have a very large unexpected medical bill? Do you have the cash reserved to absorb that if that happens? Those are critical factors. All right, then number 3 is you got to choose your route. Not all roads are going to lead to a secure financial future. And with what I've seen from just the last year and a half, oh my gosh, I'm looking at people that are on roads that are leading potentially to financial disaster. We got to get on the right track. And sometimes you're going to get delays. But if you know where you're going and you have a plan around it and you mitigate that risk, it's going to be a lot more likely that you're going to hit your target. Once you know what you want to achieve, meaning in step two, your destination, then you're able to really determine what you need to hit as far as your targets, how much return you've got to get to your goal. And then if you don't hit that, you got to put in more. Or if you are ahead of it and then something else comes up, you have a little bit of room or flexibility. You got to understand that your cash flow is like your fuel, like the fuel in your car or in the airplane. How much money do you have coming in now? And more importantly, how much money are you going to have coming in retirement? You got to identify where it's going. What are your expenditures? And you also have to identify what are wants and needs. I see so many people who lump everything together. And then when I hear how much they're spending, I'm like, oh, okay, so you're really spending a lot of money on wants versus needs. That's just rarely a good formula. In fact, it typically spells disaster. So you got to get clear on that. And then you got to really look at not only your savings and investing, but your tax plan. I see so many people that create plans and there's no knowledge or insight on how it impacts their taxes. And so then what ends up happening is they create plans that force them into a much higher tax bracket than they need to be in. It's absolutely critical because you could literally waste tens of thousands of dollars, depending on your net worth, even hundreds of thousands, if you don't have the right plan and you don't make sure that it's coordinated with your tax and retirement plan. So you want to make sure that every goal, whether it's anything from travel to retirement, has a dollar figure and timeline attached to it. If your income can't support all your goals, you've got to reassess your priorities and make sure that you're really clear on what you want to achieve. Anytime you say yes, you're inherently saying no. So you got to be really clear on what you're saying yes to. All right, the next thing you got to look at is where do you start? Now, it seems obvious that if you have debt, you're going to start there, right? But you also have to understand how much money you need. Ideally, you want to have two buckets of retirement money, your need money and your want money. And I recommend that you start with your need money. Get that taken care of. Then you've got the flexibility as far as the wants, but you got to get really clear on that. And then you got to get clear on what is a reasonable expectation as far as how much you can earn. Right now, you can't pick up a article, magazine from any financial resource or even on any news outlet without hearing about the fact that we are in a recession or we're heading to a recession or you got to plan for a recession. And so we got to make sure that right now, technically, we're not in a recession. However, there are a lot of indicators and there are a lot of people that feel like we are based on the impact some of the changes that are occurring are having on their business. So we got to get really clear on that because if we head into a recession and things slow down, it's going to impact a lot of people. I mean, you look at things that are happening right now from the fact that, the Target CEO had to take a 43% pay cut because their sales are so down. And a large part of that, some of that's political because people have boycotted them as well as Walmart. But the point is, even if you're a small business, I've heard so many people that own small businesses that say they just can't afford their products with the tariffs. So it's going to impact a lot of people. Tourism is way down. In fact, we're in Arizona and they say that Canadians, it was 10% down. Now it's 20% down. I know of probably a dozen homes that have recently sold that were Canadians that left from just a variety of different sources. And people are actually being able to afford homes that are in the tune of, say, 300,000 to 500,000 because of that. So some of that might be good, but you start getting a bunch of people that aren't spending money, that aren't coming, they're not eating out, they're not buying things, they're not contributing to our economy. People are going to feel that. So we got to be aware of that. And you got to make sure that that's part of your plan, especially if you're in a business that is going to be impacted by it. And a lot of businesses are. All right. Number 5, you got to identify how you're funding your goals. So for example, if you know that your grandchild or your child is going to need $100,000, how are you going to fund that? And how are you going to make sure it's realistic? Ideally, you're working with a financial advisor, so you get that. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/SR to access an advisor. But that's really important because you want to make sure that you've got a realistic return and you know how much you need to be putting away for that. Now, $100,000, I don't know if that's going to be enough. Maybe you need 200,000, maybe you need 400,000. You got to make sure it's realistic and you got to really get clear on that because it's going to become more and more important, especially if our economy tightens. All right. You also want to look at where you are from a standpoint of retirement and what you need to do to fund those goals. Are you maximizing employer matches? As I shared with you, I have seen a few different situations over the year and a half that literally people are not, for whatever reason, are not funding what their employer matches. Sometimes it's just because they've been lazy and they haven't done it. I've seen several of those cases. Other ones, they've been given bad advice by advisors. The point being is, my friends, that's free money. I wish I could just like raise my hand and say, if you have an employer match plan, I'll fund it and get the match. You can do whatever you're doing. It's free money. And then you got to determine if you should be converting your IRAs or your 401ks into a Roth. A lot of people don't even know how to do that analysis, but that's something that's really important, especially the fact that long-term taxes are probably going to go up. You also want to make sure that your investments are aligned with your timeline and your risk tolerance. You know, the reality of it is that a lot of people have gone to sleep at the wheel, investors as well as advisors, because the market has literally gone up since Obama took over. It was like down 38% when George W. Bush left in like 2008. And then Obama got things back on track. Market was up his 8 years. They were up another 4 years with Trump, another 4 years with Biden. And now with Trump's in office now, and we're seeing the first quarter has not been good. But that said is that a lot of people right now are saying, wait a minute, why is my 401k dropping? What am I going to do? It's just simply because they were not adequately looking at what the risk tolerance is and where they should be. And that's especially important as you get closer to retirement. So you got to make sure you're clear on the goals you're funding and the fact that your investment objectives, risk tolerance are in alignment. Critical. All right, the next thing is to prepare for detours. You're going to have detours and risk is inevitable. Planning for it can change everything. You want to start with that emergency reserve or cash reserve. And now with interest rates being where they are, it's ideal because you can get a higher return, you know, between 3 and 4%. Even maybe sometimes if you have more money, significant amount, you can get even above that. But 3 to 4 is probably about average. And you want to make sure that you've got that money, 3 to 12 months living expenses, depending on your situation. Now, as far as insurances go, you want to make sure you have adequate property and casualty insurance from a standpoint of your car, your house, if you have a rental property, also your umbrella policy. You also want to make sure you have adequate disability insurance in the event that you can't work, long-term care in the event that you can't do activities of daily living, and then life insurance if you have to replace your income or you want to pay off debt or you want to leave a legacy. You know, a lot of people get life insurance because they want their future generation to have a better life. I will tell you a story about a client of mine, and I do have permission. I always get permission before I tell stories, but her goal was just to basically leave her kids. It was actually the goal was to a little less than $1 million each. And it was so funny because she did not need life insurance and she was so adamant. And so the kids ended up actually getting more than $1 million each, which is so exciting. But it was so funny. That was her entire life goal. It was her life goal from the time I met her and for the entire 36 years that I worked with her. That's the power, my friends. But you also want to look at if you're making sense with what you're doing when it comes to your detours, meaning you can get life insurance policies that have different types of long-term care riders. They might have chronic illness. They may have different aspects of long-term care. And so is that important? If it is, then make sure and include that. Recently, we did one where the cost to get a chronic life coverage was only $80 a month. And in this particular situation, it was important because they didn't have a lot of excess cash to fund a traditional long-term care plan. Now, generally speaking, a traditional plan is going to cover you more. It's going to be better. But if you can't afford it, then you got to look at what the next best option is. There are also hybrid plans that allow you to combine life insurance with your retirement through an annuity. and or through long-term care. So you just got to know what you need, where you are, where you're going, and then make sure you've got the cash to fund it. And then you also want to look at potentially self-insuring. Now, this can be a good option if you have money. I'll just use myself as an example. Can we fund our long-term care? Absolutely, but we still have hybrid policies. Now, they're not enough to cover everything, but they're enough to give us some reprieve. And so, again, you got to look at yourself and look at what makes sense. I just felt from what I've seen with my clients and how expensive it is, having some additional coverage is a good thing. All right. Number 7, you want to review your plan annually. Life changes, markets shift, your goals evolve. You got to make sure your plan keeps pace with that. And an annual review can help you stay on track and make small corrections before they become major problems. I want you to think of your goals as if they're written in pencil, you can adjust them. They're not permanent. You can make changes to them, and you should be. When you hit a speed bump or a roadblock, you can then look at what are your priorities, make sure they are still in line. And then as you need to make changes to your course and you need to course correct, you're in a position to do so. And then number 8, the arrival at the destination, which is really a financially secure life you love. I want you to imagine it. Your financial plan is in place. You have done the heavy lifting. You're traveling, you're volunteering, you're golfing, you're getting massages, you're spending time with loved ones. You've got to get clear on that. I can't. Just imagine that. And more importantly, imagine how you feel, that peace of mind, that joy. And I will say this much, since I have been working so extensively on peace of mind and what I really want to achieve when I retire and what I want my life to feel like, not just look like, but really feel like, it's like my entire life has changed. I have so much less stress and I have so much more inner peace. And I really am loving everything about my life. And the great news is that I am full blown back into being an advisor, but I get to choose who I work with. So when I meet with somebody and they're not in the right vibe or energy, I don't have to serve them. I can get them to another advisor that'll be a better fit. My friend, that is priceless. And it's because peace of mind, in my opinion, is the most important thing. Peace of mind. And to have peace of mind and to have financial security, you've got to have your health, you've got to have your wealth, and you've got to have clarity on what you want. And you got to know that emotion that comes with it. A lot of people are hoping things are going to be taken care of, that they've got a plan, and you've got to get in the driver's seat and create that plan. You've got to be the one that makes it happen. And when you make smart choices, you adjust when needed and you prioritize what matters most, you can do that. And I want to congratulate you for tuning in. And more importantly, for just having the focus and having the desire to learn what you need to do. And now what I want you to do is to really take the next step and to create your plan. And then more importantly, start implementing it. And you're going to get distracted. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to have challenges. But when you have a plan that's adaptable, flexible, and is getting you to do the right things and giving you direction of where you're heading and guiding you in the direction you want to go, everything changes, my friends. So I look so forward to hearing your comments. You can head over to YouTube, to The Millionaire Insider, and go down to our podcast and make a comment if you want. But I would love to hear, more importantly, what you're doing to create a secure financial future you love. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/SR to talk to me or one of my advisors and really get some direction on what you need to do. I'm Annette Bao. All international copyrights are reserved. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now. If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so that you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for Next Step Finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Ba'u, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.